Rebellious Studio presents the Mind Body Podcast with your host, Maria Angelova. Hi, Rebels, and welcome to the Mind Body Podcast, your rebellious podcast with me, your host, Maria, where it is all about a strong body, calm mind, healing, and fully living. It is my pleasure today to welcome my guest, Kyle Nichols. Hello, Kyle. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Maria. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited about our episode. We started chatting pre-episode, and I was like, wait. This is great content for the podcast. So let's do it here and share those words of wisdom with our audience. And Kyle, before we get into like the core of our conversation, let's start with a fun question, which is give us 3 words that describe who you are and give us a little bit of a backstory behind each one of them.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So when you had originally asked me that, it's so many thoughts go through your mind. How and 3 words to describe yourself. So, I would say the first one to describe me is driven. And when I say driven, and that actually goes to the second word as well, which I think I told you is emulous, which is kind of an interesting word because it has a negative connotation and it has a positive connotation. And the reason I chose emulous is because the positive definition of emulous is really a sort of a relentless sort of drive to excel and achieve, and not settling for the status quo. And I think that really describes me literally to a T. The third word that describes me, I think, is respectful. Pretty simple word, but I think definitely, certainly over the past few years, with our society in general, I think that's a term that has kind of lost a little meaning. So I really try to manage how I interact with people every day by just keeping that word firmly in mind. Respectful. Again, it all boils down to treat other people how you want to be treated, right? That's been around forever.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think the one thing that pops to my mind when you say respectful is, I think we have lost touch of how to respect each other's opinions. It is okay to think differently because you think one way because of your reasons why, and I think differently because of my reasons why. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to have a conversation where we are on different pages and to not get mad at each other. And, I told this to a friend one time. I said, you will change nobody's mind by becoming defensive and mean and angry. Mm. And I think that goes back to the word respectful. If you can have respectful, open conversations, I think we can go much further than if we're attacking each other. I don't know if that relates to you or not.
Well, the other thing, and not to have a whole podcast on the term respectful, which we probably could, right? Yeah. But you'll excel so much more personally and professionally if you just keep that idea, that term with you all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And again, you just treat people how you would like to be treated. And I tend to, I like to do that, certainly unless somebody gives me a reason not to be respectful. Right. And even then I'm going to try to be respectful. So, yeah.
And I think that also goes hand in hand with being open-minded and being exposed to, one of my favorite things is travel. And I love it because I'm exposed to different people, different cultures, different ways of thinking. it allows me to expand my thinking instead of saying, you should act like I do. No, why do you act? What's your culture? What's your belief system? What are your customs? I think that enriches us. And you also said something else I wanted to comment, and it just escaped right away. But keeping an open mind. And I think, one thing I tell my clients is, if you don't like somebody, if you don't like the way they think, the way they behave, whatever it is, go for coffee with them and hear their story and see if somehow you relate to them more and see them in a different light than when you saw them before.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned clients, and we talked a little bit before we started recording. I owned two personal training studios for a period of time, and just having worked with so many different types of people and so many different types of personalities, I'd be lying if I said that I initially loved every one of my clients, right? But I always kept in mind, no matter how they may have rubbed me the wrong way, or how maybe we didn't click immediately, I always kept in the back of my mind, these people are coming to you for a reason. They want your help. So you have to be able to sort of adapt to their personality. So, and I'm sure you can relate to that. So
it's very interesting you brought that up. I was talking to a colleague as far as clients, and I will tell you, I am very lucky. I love every single one of my clients. Now, my business model is a little bit different than a gym, right? I do a lot of one-on-one coaching. So I can be very selective in who I work with. And she made a comment. She said, well, if you have a big overhead, sometimes you get desperate to pay the rent and you just take whoever. And I think that's a slippery slope there, because I think if you have people who are misaligned in values, or people who like to rock the boat in a not so respectful way, right? And that energy spreads around. I mean, that's just like having a bad seat in the office, right? That can become tricky in terms of managing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I should probably clarify, my two facilities, they were very small, private personal training studios. So we were working with, by and large, a very sort of above average to wealthy clientele. But no, you're right. When you own your own business, and I guess this goes into entrepreneurship and everything else, you do run the risk of, maybe overreaching for a person or a client you don't necessarily want to work with, but you have to work with. So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. There's no question.
I also think, and that's going to take us to our next topic, into mind body, is I think part of that is mindset. And I think the more you become secure into who you are and the type of energy that you want around you, and the more confident you become into and knowing that that energy is there, right? You begin trusting the process and knowing that the perfect right clients will show up your way. And I've gone a long way since, I started my business, almost 7 years ago now, into making sure that we've got good mojo and great energy here.
Yeah. And you mentioned energy. I was literally just going to say that, because you can believe me. And I owned my facilities for about 6 years. I opened my first one on January 4th, 2008. And if you would have told me that we were going to be in what became known as the Great Recession, I may have never have opened that studio. But the people you work with and the people you surround yourself with, whether that's clientele, whether that's friends, acquaintances, it's all about, do these people give you energy, or do they sap your energy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was teaching my daughter that the other day. I was like, you got to be careful of those energy vampires that are just going to suck your energy right out.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a big difference. And, you know, I mean, whether you're in a big corporation, your employees, right? Your leadership team, the energy that's there, it's going to spread to your clients. It's going to, you know, attract a different type of client. So it's very important that you keep things neat and clean and aligned with yourself and who you are.
Well, that's the great thing about owning your own business. You can make those decisions. You're the one who's in charge, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So Kyle, you and I share kind of similar backgrounds, both into the fitness world, and then you went into mind, body, and money.
Yeah.
And we started talking about that. I shared with you one of my favorite quotes, that your body is an expression you do physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And you were talking how if any one aspect, well, let you share it, so I'm not repeating it. You tell us what you said. That's the danger of having those pre-recording conversations.
When I wrote my book, and I'll just give a shameless little plug here, it's Mind, Body, and Money. I just, over time, and I drew on my experiences working with those clients that we just talked about. And I drew on my own experiences, which I get into, I discuss in a little more detail in the book. And over time, it just became very clear to me, again, through the experiences of my clients and my own experiences, that those three areas, first of all, you and I both know, your listeners probably realize that financial stress is just a massive stress.
It's a real thing.
A lot of people, right? But what are the sources? What are the main areas that cause people the most stress in their lives? And it just, again, through my experience, through my experience with my clients, it was pretty obvious. There are three main areas where that cause us the most stress. And those are emotional stress, mental, emotional stress, physical stress, and financial stress. Those are the three main areas of stress. And while they may not, while something may not fit neatly into one of those three areas, chances are that one of those three areas is what is causing you this other type of stress, right? So if I'm struggling with money, if I am just awake all night worrying about money, do you think that could potentially impact my relationship with my spouse? Probably.
Yes.
Could it impact my relationship with my friend group? Probably. What if I'm struggling with how I feel physically? What if I'm not happy with how I feel physically or how I look physically? Do you think that could potentially impact some other element in my life? Absolutely. So what I did with the book is take those experiences, and I gave people a plan, a routine. I'm a very big advocate, a very big proponent, as I'm sure you are, of, right?
Yes.
Of having a healthy routine.
You have to be intentional about it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
I mean, I tend to like structure. don't take that the wrong way. I don't really think I'm a boring person, but I do tend to like structure. I'm comfortable with structure. I like routine. And I think most people would benefit from learning how to implement a healthy routine in their lives every day. But a lot of people struggle doing that. So what I set out to do in the book is develop a plan, a daily routine, which I feel will help people feel more in control of their emotional health, their physical health, and their financial health. A lot of people that are listening to this, they might be like, what is he talking about? This is crazy, but you can do it. And you just have to, again, find the right routine, get into a routine. And that's what I tried to set out to do in the book. So,
yeah. You know, I stumbled upon the emotional impact on the physical as I was working with clients, because I started seeing that their movement patterns would change. And then when I would inquire what happened, it would be stress. It would be, they didn't sleep well, they didn't eat well, they fought with their spouse, whatever it is. And I just mentioned to you how I got to the work of Louise Hay, who, for example, talks about the context, in the context of disease, she talks about the implications of emotions. And for example, low back pain is related to lack of financial security or the fear of financial security. Mm-hmm. So when somebody comes, yes, they might have a misalignment or a prior injury or arthritis or whatever. There might definitely be the physical aspect. However, sometimes, I'll give you an example, which you probably would appreciate. I was dealing with a client and she was having some pain in her butt, and I'm going through like analyzing, and I'm like, and I said, how are you doing? I was like, how is your stress level? And she goes, fine. And I said, tell me a little bit about life. And as she started speaking, she says, my husband is such a pain in the butt. And I was like, aha. And she goes, what? I said, what did you just say? Right? So it sounds funny, but your body would never lie to you. And we're so disconnected from our bodies, right? But when you start tuning in to exactly what you said, what's the state of your life and how does that reflect in your body? Are you stiff? Are you achy? Are you constipated? Is your neck tight? Like, what's going on? Can you sleep? If you can't sleep, why can you not sleep? Maybe you're having financial trouble, right? Maybe you're worrying about money.
Right. So it's all a pattern. It's all, and you just hit it with the emotional stress and how that impacted your client, right? When you're dealing with emotional stress, we get tight in some capacity, right? Lower back, shoulders, and if that's the case, then that's going to manifest itself in the way we move physically, right?
100%. Mm-hmm.
So if we move it even before that sort of emotional stress, what was causing that client of yours that emotional stress? There was something that was causing her that stress. Yeah. Was it her relationship with her spouse? Was it their finances? Was it their career? Right? So it's all links in a chain, and yeah, it's really fascinating. I'm
absolutely fascinating. And one other thing, which is what you just said, made me think is I tell a client, dysfunction in one place in the body turns into a full body dysfunction, right?
Absolutely.
Because all the compensations that kick in, to the same point that you made, an emotional imbalance is a dysfunction. You would see into your physical, you would see it into your financial, right? Let's say you're in pain, vice versa. And the pain is disabling you from being able to hang out with your friends. Maybe you're missing work, right? You can't go to work because, let's say, your back or neck hurts. Maybe you're on disability, right? So they're all tied together.
And you know, and I know you have your book, you wrote your book. The reason we write books is because we feel we can help people.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it all boils down to. And when I owned my training studios, I could only help so many people in my geographical area. Right now, I didn't have a digital training component. I'm guessing you do. Back
Now
when
I do. Before
right,
COVID, I didn't, right?
right. When we first started out, it was a brick
Brick and mortar. Yeah.
exactly. So we were limited by our geography. But now with the book, I realized, gosh, I can help so many more people by writing a book, right?
Yeah. And you know, it's I'm translating my book in Bulgarian, which is my native language.
Oh, wow.
So it's, you know, it's exciting. Like I can take that back home.
Yes.
And share
That's
it
great.
A whole other audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
So Kyle, I do have to ask you,
yeah,
what is your definition of rebellious, since you're on the Rebellious podcast?
Yeah, you know, it's my definition of that's an interesting question. I'm actually going to be on another podcast here next month where the host is asking me, he asks all his guests, what does it mean to be authentic? And I need a little more time to think about that, but rebellious, I don't necessarily consider myself rebellious, but I think over the course of my life, I've probably done things and chosen to do things that the majority of people don't do. I enjoy sort of going a different direction.
I mean, yes, we connected on the topic of getting out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. Right. And it's, so I don't know if I would necessarily define that as rebellious, but I think it all boils down to, for me anyway, is there another way of doing things? Why is everybody doing it this way? Maybe you should do it this way, right?
Whatever feels right to you.
Right. Whether that's, you know, physically, financially, right? And entrepreneurship is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Entrepreneurship may not necessarily be rebellious, but it's kind of forging your own path and doing things a little differently. So I think that's been kind of like a guiding sort of principle for me for a long time. I think I got that naturally from my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
certainly does. All right, Cal, tell me, for our listeners, an inspirational quote or words of wisdom, anything you want to leave them with.
Yeah, I was asked, well, you asked me the question in that piece on getting out of your comfort zone about a quote. And it's I will probably screw it up, but it's a quote by Thomas Edison where he says the successful person finds a habit of doing things the unsuccessful person doesn't like to do. And that is sort of, I just love that quote. I mean, if you want to excel, if you want to achieve, if you want to break out of your comfort zone, whatever you want to call it, you've got to do things that other people may not want to do. You've got
break
to
out of the pack.
Yeah, you've got to endure a little. I think everybody should endure a little discomfort in their life, whether that's physically, whether that's emotionally, and whether it's financially. The only way you grow is to, and it's cliche, but the only way to grow is to go through something that prompts you and forces you to grow. Again, whether it's physically, emotionally, or financially.
I mean, I'll tell you, that's what pushed me to grow so much, especially on the mindfulness piece, the mindset piece, is discomfort, right? When things got really uncomfortable, it was like, okay, what am I missing? What do I have to do? Mm-hmm. And it was like, let's turn the mirror and let's look where the opportunities are. And yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's empowering once you go through it.
Well, yeah, and too many people just don't want to do that. You just said the key phrase, what do I have to do, right? What do I have to do to make things better? What do I have to do?
What do I choose to do, right? Because, and I always tell people, if it works for you to stay in the comfort zone, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're happy there, it's very interesting we're bringing this topic because I do these short mindset snippets. And somebody was trying to convince me how happy she is. And I was like, if you're happy, that's fine. You don't have to convince me. But she was trying so hard. And I was like, sometimes it's okay to give yourself permission to say, things are not okay, right? And that's a first that's kind of like an alcoholic saying, I have a problem, right?
Right.
You can't fix anything until you recognize you have a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I should probably stress that. I guess I'm just not wired like that. It's okay to be comfortable. If you're okay with that, it's okay to be comfortable. I guess I'm just not wired like that. I think it was another, in the interview that we did, I'm just, the way I'm wired, I start getting uncomfortable when I feel like I'm getting comfortable.
Yeah. And you know what? That's where the rebellious comes out.
Yeah, and you know what, Maria? Sometimes I wish I wasn't like that.
But you really don't.
But you're probably right. I really don't.
I would be really boring then. I am thoroughly enjoying this conversation. Tell our listeners, where can they find you? Social media, website, where can they find you? Where can they get your book?
Yeah, so my website is kyle-nichol.com. There's a link if they're interested in purchasing the book. There's a link right on my homepage, which takes you to the Amazon link. On Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, I am at Kyle W. Nichol.
That W did throw me off, I do have to say. So pay attention. There is a W in there.
Yes, that's my middle initial. You have to kind of differentiate yourself. Yes. So yeah. So
yeah. Well, Kyle, I appreciate your time and thank you for being here. Wishing you continued success with all of your endeavors.
You as well, Maria. I really enjoyed it. I could talk for another hour with you. So
I'm sure we'll probably be talking after the recording button is off for a few more minutes.
Great.
I just have a feeling. But for those of you tuning in today, I thank you guys for tuning in. Do let us know if you have any questions and don't forget to make it a rebellious day. See you next time. Can't get enough of those rebellious conversations? Do make sure you subscribe, like, and share with your friends.